Donald Trump has done a kind of jujitsu. Trump's actions and his administration's executive actions are slowly moving towards a point where any and every American will have to have a lawyer. It is the American legal system, but he has found a way to play it like a guitar. He certainly wants to bend all available institutions, policies, and people to his will.
Guardian essay, you note that Trump and his allies have created a massive autoimmune disorder, one in which the features of American democracy turn on themselves, re-engineering democracy to kill democracy. Could you explain for our readers what exactly Trump is doing?
So what I mean to refer to by using that metaphor or image of autoimmune disorder is to notice that American democracy, whatever its flaws, and there have been many over time, has a long history of very active media, very strong judiciary, a deep commitment to the Constitution and its amendments over time, a powerful university sector, which is also devoted to independent research, debate, and inquiry, and a very strong civil society beyond the state, which is a classic sign of being a healthy democracy anywhere. The US has a very long history in this regard. And what I want to say is that Donald Trump has done a kind of jujitsu where he has taken all those strengths and turned them against American democracy. You take elections, for example. So his whole approach to elections is a way of taking that institution rather than breaking it down or dismissing it and turning it to his ends through various forms of mobilization, various ways of persuading his following or trying to expand his following, attacking opponents, etc., but all without, let's say, abandoning or completely subverting the election idea. So that's one example, but you can see it everywhere. And the courts are probably the best example. A Supreme Court, one of the judges on the Supreme Court has recently made the observation in her official capacity that Trump's actions and his administration's executive actions are slowly moving towards a point where any and every American will have to have a lawyer to contest something that Trump is doing. So it means it is the American legal system, but he has found a way to play it like a guitar. So these things are all examples of taking distinctive American strengths. They're not exclusive, of course, because India also has constitutional, electoral, other institutions. Many other societies do, but I think it's fair to say that the US more or less was born with its constitution. It doesn't have a long history before the US Constitution.
So is he planning to dismantle the America that we all know and respect? The rule of law, the clear division.
Yes. I understand what you're asking. Many of us who are, let's say, Trump watchers or Trump interpreters, it's a little bit like Kremlinology used to be. We're all watching it, trying to interpret who is standing next to whom, who's coming, who's going.
Who's being airbrushed.
Exactly. So we are all somewhat mystified, and anybody who says they have a clear idea what is his map, compass, or game plan is somehow speculating. Because there is a random element. But as I say, I think he does want to remake the primary institutions of American democracy into instruments of his will. Now, whether we say at that point that the whole democratic apparatus will have become meaningless,
Yeah.
or whether it's just a radical repurposing. And so the outline will remain. So there will be still people who are speaking freely. I'll give you one example or two. Jon Stewart, Jimmy Kimmel.
Yeah.
You watch them, and they take no hostages with Trump. I mean, they should be in the American equivalent of Siberia already, but they're
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
So that means something is still continuing, and there is no reason to doubt that it might. But he certainly wants to bend all available institutions, policies, and people to his will.
And he wants to make this permanent, which will
Yeah,
outlast his term.
yeah. He would certainly like to leave it as his legacy, which is then intact forever. The question of permanence, of course, has to do with the elections itself.
Yeah.
After all, he has to be re-elected in 4 years. So those of us like me who are hopeful on the whole that he will not capture the system in its entirety forever take refuge in the fact that he has 3 years left at the
Yeah.
moment. Unless he completely conducts a full-scale coup, as has happened in other parts of the world, and simply extends his presidency, for
He's
another
already
4 years.
spoken about that. He's already spoken about that.
Correct. He's not willing to dismiss that outright, which
Yeah.
means we cannot be complacent about it.
Yeah.
But that would take a lot of work even for him.
But he may give it to someone like Vance, who's an ideological heir apparent.
Correct. But if you look at the potential heirs, of whom Vance is a very good example, the rest are, of course, even more clownish.
Yeah.
The question whether they have a singular capacity to command loyalty, fear, and authority is unclear. So when I think of Vance sitting in the White House,
Yeah.
I think of a lot of people who would eat him for breakfast and he would not be surviving till lunch. That is not true of Trump.
Yeah.
So I don't know many people who can carry the Trump flag into an indefinite future. His sons, for example, even in his own opinion, are not, leadership material. So I am not sure that minus him, his interests can be indefinitely continued. But all of us are watching with interest to see whether he can both change the institution sufficiently and then find people who are plausible successors.
So why is there no pushback, sir? So far, there's no pushback from the rest of America. The Democratic Party is mute.
So there is a mixed opinion on this, in the sense that Democratic Party is being lampooned even by Democratic
Yeah.
observers.
Correct.
Chuck Schumer, for example,
Yeah.
is being regularly made fun of by
Yeah.
very progressive comedians and
Yeah.
critics. But I am convinced that there are a remarkable number of small actions, mobilizations, protests, lawsuits, etc., which are occurring across the length and breadth of the US. I won't say that they are of a yet networked sufficiently to be deemed a major anti-Trump movement, but America is not just sitting back. You can look at unions, you can look at teachers, you can look at these Republican town halls where Republican senators and Congress people are being literally pushed out. There is a lot of anger, there is a lot of frustration, and I would say there's a lot of confusion even among Trump's followers. So I'm of the opinion, I'm of the view that American public opinion is not really as quiescent as it may look if you just look at the Democratic Party. That said, I do think that it is not yet coalesced. And secondly, the numbers who are still mostly, according to polls, still with Trump are significant. Minimum 25 to 30% of the electorate. So that is a fact that we have to face.
So despite all the, the rampage that Musk and his other Trump cohorts have initiated, Trump still retains his the core of his following.
Well, I would say yeah. Well, yes. The crucial question is how many is that in terms of the American electorate? I say 25 to 30%. It's not a trivial number. But there is also some sense that some of those people are beginning to be concerned because their own pocketbooks are being hit, their own Medicare, Medicaid, shopping costs. So there is some ceiling, I think, on what they will put up with because it's not only against diversity, equity, that sort of thing. It is pocketbook issues close to home. And there is, to me, a ceiling on how far. So people will accept him. The second thing is that I think part of it is following Trump, and part of it is other people and other policies that many people in the American electorate are willing to indulge quite considerably. And the education business, let's say the attack on Harvard, but which should not be over focalized. It's clearly not about Harvard alone. It's about strong universities, is speaking to at the least, a communication or PR gap. American universities have not convinced many Americans that they are serving the public interest. So that is there, in a way, even without Trump's extremes, the sense, what are you doing for us about universities remains and is a very important question. And many American academics are now beginning to say, we must address that question. We can't just say we are great, we are being attacked, etc.
And so, you said you believe that nonviolent, disobedience and almost a Gandhian kind of resistance to Trump will achieve a kind of a large protest movement. But don't you think that's a bit naive to think that civil disobedience and active social mobilization will achieve resistance against Trump?
Well, yes, it requires a certain optimism about those techniques, but we must remember that Mahatma Gandhi managed to get a very powerful empire out. While kissing their cheeks and telling them how he loved them, he gave them the one-way booking back to England. So we cannot minimize that. Martin Luther King, who died at 34 age, before half his life even was done, managed to move the compass. Mandela, we hardly have to say that it's not a matter of what has happened since then. That's another story. But Mandela also succeeded in a big way. So I think these things have potential. But I would say there is one reason why we have to rely on them. And that is that any effort to do something by force, by arms, through military armed means, as if it is, let's say, Mexico or Cuba or Vietnam, in the US is doomed because there is a huge army, thousands of highly armed police forces, and of course, half the citizens are armed. So unless you want to open bloodbath in every backyard, US is different. So you have to think very carefully about, as the Black Panthers would say, picking up the gun. You pick up the gun, that can be, there is no return in the US. It's not England, it's not Switzerland, it's not Germany, it's not even India, though the scale is very different. So I would say that's another reason we must keep our minds open about nonviolent opposition, mobilization, etc. I think it's a question of coordination and networking, as opposed to doing it here, doing it there, doing it in another place. That is, for many social movements, that's the challenge, is how do you connect up? But I think there is not much choice.
So, what do you think the Democrats should do? I mean, do they need to
Yeah.
locate a leader with a charisma that can match Trump's populism?
So that is the one of the questions that interests me a lot, which I did not address in that Guardian essay or in my other writings in the Chronicle of Higher Education, etc., is something I'm very involved with now, which is to say that the liberal left, let's put it that way, even if they're not extreme left or right, but the liberal world, including the left components of it, needs to recapture the domain of affect, emotion, or feeling. That has been 100% handed over to the right. Now, again, by comparison, if you look at India, Modi has been very successful in capturing people's feelings, whether it's Operation Sindoor or, even demonetization. He had a way of saying, this is sacrifice, this is nation, etc. The opposition in India has not completely given that up. They also speak to their emotions, Rahul, etc. But in the US and in the European world, the liberal left is still working from reason and the brain. The left has 100% taken over the whole stadium on feeling affect. So the
The right, you
homework
mean?
assignment is we have to change that.
Yeah.
We have to speak to that side, not only give people facts and say this is being done, that is being done, you should worry about this and that. We have to make people feel engaged at the emotional level. We have no idea how to do that.
So Kamala Harris, and she lost the election because she just couldn't connect with the
I would say yes, she could not. There were multiple reasons for that, including the fact that Biden didn't really exit until very late.
yeah, right,
So we can pick all sorts of reasons, but I
yeah,
would say in general, whether it's Kamala Harris, whether it's Biden, or whether it's Obama, who are a very persuasive speaker and all,
yeah,
they are still cerebral. They are giving lectures and tutorials
yeah,
plus university
yeah,
degrees. That is not what the large population is moved by.
yeah. Before we this election, Shekhar Narasimhan, whom you probably heard of, the Indian American Democratic activist, he told us
Yes.
that Trump wants to make America white again. Do you think that there is any truth in that?
Yeah, I think early on, let's say a year ago, when he was cranking up his apparatus for the second term,
Yeah,
I, along with many others, thought that the basic dog whistle was to white people, saying, you have been mistreated, you have lost everything, we need to reclaim. It's not gone.
yeah,
But I would say it has been incorporated or even superseded by other things. So if you take the tariff,
yeah,
whole tariff
yeah,
game that
yeah,
he has unleashed, it's it's really so irrational that you could say, yes, it's American, it's a kind of American nationalism saying we should produce here, we should consume here, etc., completely unrealistic in the global world. But it's the white part is relatively subordinate. It is there in the anti-DEI, but anti-DEI with universities, diversity, equity, etc.,
yeah, yeah,
has now been completely superseded by all research, all funding,
yeah,
all free speech,
yeah.
all protest. So you might say, yes, there is some element of still an appeal to disenfranchised Americans who are not minorities. That is still there. So the racial element is there, but it's been swept into a much bigger agenda.
So I mean, you said that no one can predict what Trump will do today or tomorrow. So is there a, I mean, as an anthropologist, how do you, I mean, I know that you're not a psychologist, but how do you decipher this man?
Yes. Well, I have begun now to explore the theory that beyond his search for power, which is clear, beyond his search for prestige, which is also clear, I have come to the conclusion that what we really need to ponder, and I'm doing some writing on this now, is the question of money. And it is not a simple matter of corruption. He wants, because who doesn't want money? Putin wants money. Everybody wants money here, there. Money is everywhere. But I think in the case of Trump, it is his driving vice, which has no limit. It's a kind of compulsion which goes beyond all rational, things. You want this for this reason, that for that reason. I'm doing some writing on this right now, that actually it's a love of money which goes beyond all reasons. So if you want to know what is making the man take, you could say many things, but many of them seem now secondary. His sexual predation, his this, his that, his humiliating of others, even wanting to be the winner who takes all. But the purpose of all that is somehow increasing the stock. So take the Bitcoin scam. That's a beautiful case. It has no other use than money as such. It's not like you can take it tomorrow to the shop, and buy 20 cars. Maybe in some very specialized markets, but otherwise, it's pure money. It's like sitting, like Croesus with your little stack of, and it's not an easy thing to understand. Why? Because we have an approach to economics which is hardwired into us, which is that when people want money, they always want it for something else. So my current writing is saying, stop looking for the something else. And you will understand this man more than you might understand other people who are authoritarian, who are, dominating, domineering, immoral, predatory. Unfortunately, we have many of those kinds all over. But if you want to zero in on Trump, my feeling there's something to do with bottomless greed, for which the medieval name was avarice. So I am writing a little bit about that, but I'll hold off on that. But that's my interest in trying to get the key to him, if there is any key at all.
But how does that make America great again?
That is it, because it will make Trump great again. That has always been true, that make America great again has been the excuse for something. And we know that this is a man whose vision never goes beyond 1 foot beyond himself. At most, his sons can come in, his wife can come in. But even when you go to Vance, this one, that one, he'll throw them under the bus without hesitation. He will do that to Musk in the next few weeks, because Musk has begun to bark. So only he counts. That's the key. So make America great again was his electoral device, and
But
very successful.
But by, cutting off funds, the New York Times did a story day before yesterday about how science is being emasculated. American science research. America is no longer has the real danger of being no longer being the leader in science.
Correct.
So all that is I mean, it's as if he I mean it's I mean
He doesn't care, as
yeah,
if he doesn't care.
yeah, yeah,
And we earlier thought his anger was about humanities,
yeah,
cultural studies, DEI. Now it turns out it's science as a whole.
yeah.
Cut everything, medicine, biology, this, that. The truth is, I think he would like to reinvent the way all of that is managed. And recently, there's a story that he has a campaign or a slogan or a idea, a policy, something like gold standard science, meaning he will decide. Rather than throwing science out, he will decide how science will be studied, researched, what the standards will be. And scientists are already horrified, because it means he will replace the current structure of scientific debate, evaluations, guidelines, rankings, etc., which control all that money and how it is distributed, by his way of deciding what is good and all, which is a very scary thought. What will that mean? So I would say, again, it is a kind of repurposing. He knows that without American science, the Pentagon, this thing, that you can't have all the things you sort of like, major domination of the world, etc. So I think once again, as with the law, elections, everything else, he wants it done, as Frank Sinatra would say, his way.
Are you despondent about the future of America?
Not really, because I think I think it's a very serious crisis. It's a crisis without historical precedent. But my feeling is that the US was in a way born as a breakaway society from the British Empire. It has had its share of enormous crises. There are many people whose opinion I respect who see the Civil War as an extraordinarily large crisis from which Lincoln and others brought the US. So I think it's not the first crisis, it won't be the last crisis, but it will certainly be, in retrospect, a crisis which will prove to have really tested the kind of core strengths and infrastructure, that is, political infrastructure, cultural infrastructure of the US. But net, partly because there is still a system of elections, which is every 4 years, unless it's disposed of, and because I do believe that the jury is still out, so to speak, on how the Supreme Court. I mean, there are days we feel positive, days we feel despondent,
Yeah.
but the Supreme Court has not folded completely and said, please tell us what to do.
So those guardrails will remain to some extent.
I am optimistic that they will remain, but they will only remain so far as there is some significant proportion of the population that is actually mobilized. And there is some sign of that because if you look at all these court rulings against him,
Yeah.
every level in the system, they are reflecting something. And I'm hopeful that that something can also be pushed up into the Supreme Court and so on. So yes, I am guarded, of course, in the prediction business. But if you ask me to choose, I would say yes, I'm still hopeful that even this really very major effort to undo American institutions will not entirely succeed or succeed forever.
Do you see that this Trumpism being so entrenched in the political system that, like Mrs. Thatcher's time, where she remained in power and her Thatcherism remained in power for 18 years, something like that will happen in America and the
It's
Democrats won't get in
it's
through the door?
it's not uh, it's not impossible. But I would say, if you just flash back to 15 years ago, say when Obama came to power, this was unthinkable. That means the clock can go backwards also. In other words, there was a genuine national movement. And I'm not saying Obama was perfect. Obama had all sorts of limitations, but he represented something extremely different in terms of hope, inclusion, all those things, and principles. And that is not so long ago. So we must remember that Trump has not had that long a time to put his whole DNA into the system. And he is not a direct descendant, say, of Reagan or Nixon, where you could then say, really, what we are seeing is a kind of continuation of them with a few interruptions in between. But I don't think so. I think this man is in a league of his own in the
Right.
sense of being driven by his narcissism
Yeah.
also. All those other people had some idea of the national good.
Yeah.
For him, there is none.
And do you think, since you mentioned Obama, do you think Obama's election was a kind of a spur for white America to
No doubt.
to coalesce?
No doubt. There were a lot of people who said, towards the end of Obama's regime, now they have had their chance. I've literally heard this from people.
Okay.
Meaning, black people got their shot at the White House, didn't work, that's it. So there's a lot of racial whiplash, and it has dripped like a hospital, saline drip into the American consciousness and created a renaissance of the white issue, which is behind a lot of the MAGA stuff. Although there are, of course, puzzles because this white nationalism in the US is not notorious for its interest in controlling anti-Semitism, for example. So there are some still strange bedfellows.
Contradictions.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. But to go to your main question, I am optimistic that the cellular structure of the US, you might say, even if one sees a lot of problems in it, that these are not, in general, people who like to be told too much what to do. They will wake up to that everything would be based on what you are told to do. And no ordinary American citizens, right, left, or center, are not big fans of heavy micro regulation of what they do.
So finally, you would what can we expect from Trump in the short term and in the long term? I mean, are we going to see
Well, in the
more?
short term, I think what he's focused on is his legal battles and putting tremendous resources, human resources, administrative resources, expertise, which he has access to capture the legal system, because then everything else like dominoes can go,
Yeah.
whether it's the economy, whether it's this, whether it's tariffs, or whether it's universities, race,
Yeah.
etc. Courts to me are
The last.
very important. Also for his own personal, because he has cases galore. They can be brought back again once he's a ordinary citizen. Not all of them will be wiped out because he was president. So he himself has things to worry about. But insofar as he has things he wants to get done, he has to capture the entire judicial system. And if he can capture it from the top, fine, but he has to work at every level.
So the Supreme Court, since it has at least three nominees whom he nominated, three judges whom he nominated. Do you think that they will resist um, the onslaught?
Yeah, I think it's a very tricky balance at the moment. Also, because the Chief Justice is not his appointee.
Correct.
Actually, it is Bush's appointee. And Roberts is, by everybody's account, a very serious legal thinker. He is not in anybody's pocket. He's conservative, but that's different than saying he's a Trump guy. So I would say this. My optimism about the Supreme Court is not based on the relative strength of the conservatives, some of whom are awful, Alito and
Kavanaugh.
Clarence Thomas.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kavanaugh, Thomas.
Yeah.
They are, not very desirable characters. But I think, like any other institution, anybody who tells them that in 5 years you're going to be irrelevant, they're not going to be happy about. So I rest my hope on the fact that the Supreme Court, people don't get there, like Churchill said about India, to preside over the liquidation of their own power.
Yeah.
So that's my final grounds for hope.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir.